We're here today, April 22nd, 2019, at the Embassy Suites in Tampa, Florida, with the 47th President of the Florida Association of School Psychologists, Dr. Mary Alice Myers. Welcome, Dr. Myers.
Thank you, Denise.
So I understand that you're here for a conference. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Certainly. I'm here for the Florida Problem Solving RTI project, which I'm sure all the school psychologists in Florida know about the project. And they're actually doing an RTIE, which is Response to Intervention Eligibility for Specific Learning Disabilities. And this is the third of 4 of the series.
Well, that sounds very interesting. And that actually coincides a little bit about what you worked on when you were actually president. When was that, Dr. Myers?
That was back, it started in November 2003 at the conference and extended to November 2004.
Okay. Well, we're going to be hearing quite a lot about that in a moment, but you're still quite active with the executive board. Could you tell us a little bit about your current board responsibilities?
Certainly, Denise. I'm currently the Administration and Supervision Committee Chair for FASP and have been doing that for several years. I've actually been on the FASP board for a number of years. Like Jean Cash and Frida Reed and I are probably the longest running board members on there currently. And under this, we typically work very much on the internships process. So I work with the Training and Credentialing Chair, who currently is Sarah Valley Gray, and to make sure that interns are matched to districts and districts get who they need and follow rules. And also now we're really addressing the critical shortage, which is a very critical area of school psychology in the state.
Well, we are very lucky to have you on the board, and we hope you continue for many years to come. Now, what about your professional responsibilities? What are you doing at the present time?
At the present time, I'm Assistant Director for Exceptional Student Education, or ESE, and Student Services in Volusia County Schools.
Okay, well, how did being a school psychologist impact your current position?
You know, back in the day, and I hope I don't hear this term any longer, but school psychology was often considered the gateway to special education. Mm-hmm. That being said, there truly is a lovely partnership between school psychology and special education. In fact, many of the directors of NASD, which is the National Association of State Directors for Special Education, are former school psychologists. Or as I say, once a school psychologist, always a school psychologist. So there is a nice partnership there, and it really helps with looking at data to see if programs are being effective, to ensure that the appropriate eligibility criteria are used, to monitor data to make sure that not too many children are coming into special education, and more appropriately, helping with those exit decisions. I think school psychologists also bring some real expertise to the whole piece with emotional behavior disabilities and helping support those programs within administration and ESE and student services.
Yes, and the rest of us are very grateful to have former school psychologists in high positions and decision-making positions. Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about your presidency. What would you say are some of the major accomplishments or events that took place under your leadership as the FASP president?
Well, 2004 was a really critical, exciting year for school psychology because, as many people will recognize, that was the year of IDEA 2004, or the Individuals with Disabilities Education Improvement Act. Even though we did not see it come to fruition for several years, it came out for review. And FASP, as many national associations and state associations, offered their feedback and input during invited input sessions. It's really interesting for anybody that would ever be interested in going back into the federal regulations and looking at the preamble. You can see where FASP had comments that were shared in the beginning sections of the federal regulations for IDA. One of the most notable being that initially it was written to only say comparison, for instance, for eligibility for SLD compared to age. And we felt strongly as an association it needed to be compared to peers in grade level. And because understandably we had so many children being retained because of the Eft Act in 3rd grade. And the comments were noted. There were other comments similar. There's a lot of interesting comments. It really gives a flavor at the time of the division between psychological processing and RTI, because the comments were all over the place with that. But if you go through and read it, you see RTI appearing over 100 times in the federal legislation. So it really set the foundation for what has shaped our practices to the current time. So that was an important piece. The Eft Act was a big thing happening at the time too, which is now the FSA, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
So FASP took a very strong stand on the high stakes use of the test. With Gene Cash and others, we were in Tallahassee lobbying, meeting with state senators and representatives about abolishing the high stakes use. We had a position paper on that. So we focused a lot of our energies on that. We also that year wrote the corporal punishment paper to abolish corporal punishment in Florida, which was happening all around the state. Even though we didn't see any changes at that time, several years later, Duval County abolished it, and the Associated Press picked up the story and in part cited and credited the FASP position paper for that change. So those were all things, sometimes you don't see the fruits of a executive board labor at the time, but we certainly saw it later.
That's extremely important, and how interesting that here you are today continuing to work on RTI and looking at eligibility at a new conference.
Absolutely.
What would you say some of the challenges were that occurred during your tenure as FASP president?
It's one of those double-edged swords where I was very looking forward to 2004 IDA and excited about the changes and the promises for students and the promises for the profession. I had a ESC director, not from Volusia, but from another very large district in the state, stop me and say, wow, I guess school psychologists will no longer have jobs as a result of this. And I was like totally caught off guard, but took the opportunity to say, no, we're going to be even more viable and valuable because we'll be more involved in prevention and early intervention activities and get to do other things. I remember back around those days, especially when I was a school psychologist in elementary schools, if someone didn't know my name, they'd holler and say, hey, testing lady. And I was bound and determined not to be known as that person, but hey, person who helps students with behavioral, mental health, and academic issues, if they weren't to know my name. Right. So there was a lot of that. I was really surprised that that was in ESC administration, a thought. So that was a challenge. The corporal punishment paper, I didn't think that would be as controversial as it was. Mm-hmm. But we at the time had listed a list of the districts who were still using the practice. A lot of them were the smaller rural districts, although as I mentioned, Duval was one. But I had a couple of superintendents call me and say that they wish I hadn't called them out. They were elected superintendents, and they felt corporal punishment was really important in their districts. So that was a challenge as well. Another challenge, which I think, again, is so ironic and coincidental that I'm here today for this meeting. I remember for Summer Institute wanting to bring in David Prossi, who is just a fabulous presenter and legal expert on RTI and eligibility, and approaching him and asking him, to come to our Summer Institute, and him responding, well, why do you need to know why that's important with SLT eligibility? And I had no answer. And in hindsight, going back to that, I realized what he was trying to get me to think of was RTI at that time was really all about improving core instruction, helping students be successful, getting away from just framing it all about eligibility. So I think the state project is wise to have let several years go by and now be looking at the eligibility piece rather than rolling that out at the same time that the law came through.
I see. So that does kind of coincide with some of your accomplishments too, because you actually moved through a lot of those problems and had some successes, and actually you're continuing to work, which is very interesting. Would you say that in addition to some of the environmental kind of events that you've already spoken about, were there any other political or personal influences on your presidency that you'd feel comfortable sharing?
Well, politically, Jeb Bush was governor at the time, and very wisely, 2 years earlier, in 2002, he had established the Florida Center for Reading Research, and very wisely put Dr. Joe Torgeson as executive director. And that really shaped, I think, school psychologists' practices in the state, and probably beyond, certainly Florida. Because before then, many of us were not certainly experts in reading. And so at that time, we started talking about phonological awareness. We started talking about deficits that impacted reading comprehension and academic success. So that shaped a lot of things on the political landscape. I remember meeting Dr. Torgerson and asking him, what do you picture school psychologists doing 10 years from now? How will the field change? And at the time, I couldn't wrap my head around this. But he said, I see school psychologists being much more involved in group data and group assessments. And at the time, I was like, okay, we do so much individually. That was what school psychologists did. That's how I practice a child one by one. But now in hindsight, I think about early warning systems and all kind of things that have group data at its core and how prophetic his statement was. Environmentally, you asked about environmental influences, and very literally, environmentally, we had 4 hurricanes come through that year.
Wow.
So that was a very infamous year for some board members whose houses were damaged, and certainly for thousands of students and schools around the state. FASP took a strong leadership position by quickly developing a CD and resources and offering our support through crisis response to districts, sending NAS materials. The CD is still, I think, one of the best things that Sarah Valley Gray and perhaps Kimberly Hill, I believe, was very involved in that whole development of that, and it just was a terrific resource to be able to provide to superintendents across the state, and showed again how viable and valuable FASP is.
Well, I would certainly agree with you. And being a FASP president, what would you say that whole experience meant to you personally?
That was, without a doubt, one of the best experiences professionally in my career. At the time of becoming a president, I was a school psychologist in the field, which to this day I will contend is the best job in education there is. After that, shortly after that, became the coordinator of school psychology in Volusia County and then evolved to my current position. Without that leadership skills that developed in FASP, without those connections with great people around the state that I counted on for different things and continue to lean on, I would not have become the school psychologist I am today or the leader I am, I believe. I think that it really gave me a set of skills and connections that have really helped shape the way I think professionally.
Well, many other people think the same way in terms of the high level of development of your professional skills, because you happen to be one of the very few people who were selected to serve not only as FASP president, but who were honored with the Willard Nelson Lifetime Achievement Award in 2017. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
What can you tell us about what led to your receiving that award, which is highly prestigious in our profession?
And that was such an honor and such a surprise. So, and I just cherish the people on the board who nominated me for that. FASP gives you, by virtue of being on the board, and Denise, you're aware of this by being on the board for several years too, a lot of opportunities that you wouldn't have not be involved on the board. So I had the opportunity and privilege of serving on several other committees across the state, with the SLD rule, with the development of the GTIPs. The original one has since been revised. With NASP, with certain things, especially with NASP, with the evaluation tool for personnel, for school psychologists using the NASP practice model. And that, I'm sure, being selected to work with Stacy Skalski on that and write a chapter in best practices came out of being involved with the SSPEM, the Student Services Professional or Personnel Evaluation Model. So there's just been lots of terrific opportunities that have arisen, some opportunities for publishing. Been very involved in things over the course of my career, especially with differential diagnosis of emotional handicap at the time and conduct disorders, which at one time FASP had a terrific book that I still think is one of the best publications. And then from there wrote a couple of journal articles nationally for that. So I had nothing to do with the FASP document, but it piqued my interest professionally in there. So again, FASP gives you, by being involved with FASP leadership, I think lots of opportunities and open doors to get involved with other things where you can make significant impact.
And obviously you're continuing to make significant impact, so that's even more exciting. I wanted to ask you, is there anything else that you'd like to impart with us as a former president of the Florida Association of School Psychologists?
I would encourage all school psychologists, if you're not a member, become one. Back in 2004, we had 1,000 members. We're 1,000 members strong, and we're as strong as our membership. It gives us more opportunity for advocacy, for providing excellent professional development. The field has obviously changed and keeps evolving. I love the focus on mental health that is now, for some very unfortunate circumstances, but that we have these opportunities to be more and more involved. So I encourage everyone out there who is interested in becoming a school psychologist, become one. Mentor, if you're a school psychologist currently, mentor someone, mentor a young professional, or go to high schools and college classes to pull people into the field. We all have that responsibility to address a critical shortage and pull people into this fabulous profession.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mary Alice Myers, 47th President of the Florida Association of School Psychologists.
Thank you.